Hey, LinkedIn. Mike Black here. We are going to get started in exactly 3 minutes. It's 11:57 here in Denver. We will get started at noon Denver time. My guests are all here and primed and ready, and we've been complaining about fire smoke coming from California. And it turns out Canada faces the same problem. The Western Canadians are burning their forests, and it's driving people in Toronto crazy. Fun fact for you. So there you go. Everybody, why don't you hold on if you're filtering in, and we will be back in exactly 3 minutes. All right, LinkedIn, we are 2 minutes from a start. We're looking forward to talking to you. If you're filtering in, I would love it if you would like and share this post so we can get a couple more people to watch it. We'll be starting and talking about how to build a strong business culture in just 2 minutes. The waiting is the worst part. I sit here and watch the clock tick, and it's like tick, 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 tick. I'm like, come on, I want to get started. I started early on accident last week. Folks, you out there in the world cannot see this, but they're all laughing at me. All right. Doing it again this week. Hey, LinkedIn. I'm Mike Black, and this is the Page Black Leadership Series. We meet every Thursday, and what I do is I invite a panel of experts to come in and talk about challenges that business leaders are facing, well, really business leaders in the middle market are facing, and then we really get into some solutions. My goal at the end of every one of these is to give you some actionable baby steps, because I think we all start too big. So actionable baby steps that you can walk away with and getting started. Today, we're going to be talking about how to build a strong business culture. And we'll get into some of these questions in just a minute, but I want to give you some context as you think about this. I was on a call yesterday where I was talking to a corporate or a commercial real estate agent, and he said that here in Denver, 30% of the offices are vacant. And so that's a historic number. Even I don't believe they even hit that number in 2008 when we had the crash and all of the things that went on then. In fact, I think it was like 28 or 29% then, if I remember his data correctly. So we know that office space is changing. We also know there's masks, there's no masks, where there's this hybrid. Are we going hybrid? Are we going to go remote? Are we going all in person again? And it's a real struggle. And what I'm hearing when I meet with people is, one, certain sets of people really do want to be remote all the time or hybrid at a minimum. They don't really want to go back to work full time. They don't like the commutes. They want to be in their home. They want to be comfortable. One person I was on a call with yesterday said, I hate being in the office because the air conditioners drive me insane and I'm cold all the time. And I thought that is such a great motivation to be at home. But other people, it's really, they want to be back in the office, especially younger workers is what I'm seeing, is that they want to build the networks that they need in order to build a career. And it's really hard to do that in a remote environment. So let's layer all of those changes, the fact that we're constantly pivoting, and then talk about how do you build a business culture in a hybrid work environment. It's a real challenge. So before we go anywhere, let me introduce my panel today. First, I have Becky Magnotta, and she's the founder and executive coach of Homestead Coaching and Consulting. Her mission is to create great places to work by building great leaders and teams. Now, I had a call with Becky. Not everybody does this, but Becky reached out and said, hey, let's talk. And I really appreciated her perspective. So I think you'll get a lot out of that. Her coaching supports senior leaders and executives and helps them discover their purpose, accomplish their professional and personal goals, and find balance. And really, who doesn't want balance? All right, my next guest is Allison Seebeck. She's the executive director of the Warehouse Business Accelerator. And Allison, I'm going to read her thing, but I want to tell you a little bit about why I invited Allison as well. Allison's passions and professional experiences lie at the intersection of people, culture, growth, and change. And this is the part I'm excited about. She's previously led a rapidly scaling global services business. And she now is building a resource network for innovative technology and manufacturing companies, which is exciting. We have a lot of challenges in the manufacturing sector right now, and there really is a lot of pain there. There's a lot of discussion even around supply chain today, if you read the Wall Street Journal. But I'm excited because Allison's had to do this. She didn't have to do it remote, didn't exist then. I don't think, Allison, correct me if I'm wrong, but having to build culture is important and that experience is valuable. So we'll have that. Next, we have Shauna Nelson. And she's a development practitioner specializing in learning, leadership, and coaching. I'm sorry, I didn't get to tell you what she said. She is the DEI managers at Sobeys. And she's currently applying 20 years of experience in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And I had a delightful call with Shauna. And what I really appreciated is Shauna's got such a safe vibe that you feel like you could tell her anything. And I feel like that's going to add a lot of perspective because I think people will tell her anything and she's going to give us things that no one else is going to know. All right. My name is Mike Black. I'm the CEO, managing partner, and janitor at Page Black. And least important person on this call, all I do is now I actually ask questions and give answers or my thoughts. But let's roll right into it. And let's start off with, I think a lot of people, there are a lot of different perspectives on what culture is. And so let's just define briefly, what is culture when it comes to business? And if I can follow, I'm on the wrong screen there. I was like, can't find my button. All right, Becky, let's get started with you. That wave just caught me. Let's do it.
Okay. So for me, culture is really thinking about who are we and what do we value? And then how do we behave according to what we value? And thinking about it too, a lot of it is around productivity, people, and processes. And what do we value the most? Is it being productive? Is it taking care of people? And by people, do we mean stakeholders? Do we mean our customers, or do we mean our employees, or do we mean all of those? So culture incorporates all of that conglomeration.
I love your answer. And that's the first time I've really heard someone say process is a part of your culture. Tell me more about that.
Oh, to me, it's like, so how do we do things? How do you onboard people? How do you buy things? What do you have to go through? If there's, do you have talent management? How do you do that? All the different things that you have to do to get things done.
Right. And so if your culture, I get where you're going. I get it now. I don't know why I didn't get it before, but if your culture is somebody that says you value your employees, you want them to feel valued, and yet you have an onboarding process that doesn't value them, doesn't train them, throws them to the wolves, you really don't have a culture that values people because you're not walking the talk.
Are you aligned with your values?
Right. Okay. All right, Allison, what do you think?
I like to talk about culture as the air we breathe. It's what we live in. It's what's all around us. And we don't think about it. In fact, there's only 2 occasions where we think about the air we breathe. When it's refreshing and uplifting, or smells good and makes you happy, or when it's suffocating and it's toxic and it brings you down and makes you feel icky. And culture is very similar in a business context. We often don't explicitly think about all the pieces that make up culture, but we breathe them every day. We live amongst them. And air has oxygen and it also has other particles in it, right? So it's behaviors. And Becky, I love that you mentioned processes. In addition to the processes around people, if you value repeatability and quality, you follow your processes meticulously. And someone who comes in who doesn't follow processes meticulously and doesn't value that same quality angle is going to feel like they don't fit culturally. It's also the way that we work with each other. It's the activities that we do. I mean, people often just throw culture into the bucket of the games we play at lunch or how often we have social events. But really, it's about what we expect from each other. And when we violate what we expect from each other, how do we handle that? And how does that impact the way that we feel either refreshed by the business that we're in or suffocated by the business that we're in?
Boy, the air. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm feeling refreshed here in Fall, Colorado. But that said, Allison, I now have a question for you. Briefly talk about, it was really fascinating when we talk about the company that you scaled and what that was like and where kind of the starting point and the end point where you kind of, because I think you had you went from 10 to 100, if I remember right, employees, but maybe I've got that wrong.
Yeah, during the time that I was at the organization called ProSci, it's a change management training and research organization with operations and partners globally who are teaching leaders and teaching businesses how to more effectively lead people through change. The company was started by an engineer. So you might imagine what the culture felt like early on. Process was huge. It was also very much a culture of try and do your best and be a hero to make the customer see that what we have is valuable and to provide what we know well and to not provide the things that we don't know well. So in the way we interacted with each other, the way we interacted with our suppliers and our customers, it was very clear about what we did and what we didn't do. And that turned a lot of our relationships with customers into a very transactional nature. This is what we offer. If you want it, great. If you don't want it, go find someone else. And that doesn't sound good, right? But that permeates the way that you think about structuring your marketing materials, the way you think about structuring your client engagement and customer representative positions, the way you think about the service delivery side of what you do. And so we went through a process as we were at a scale up phase to transform from a transactional mindset to a relational mindset. And that permeated all the way down to our employees, the way we did onboarding and the way we did hiring. All of those pieces were focused around trying to be relational. And so we expanded from about 20 people when I joined the business to almost 100 with 3 international locations in the 5 years that I was in the president role at ProSci.
All right. So I want you to give us one quick tip because you went exactly where I wanted you to go. You went from a transition around what your culture is like when you started and what it was like when you ended in that transition. How do you hire? Because you talked about when you hire someone that's not a fit for the culture, it becomes very clear very quickly. They know and you know quickly. But the best idea is not to hire people that aren't a cultural fit. What's your one tip for people that do that? Have to face that.
Yeah, and it's a slippery slope because we want to bring in diverse ideas and values and opinions. And at the same time, the way we work also is a piece of the culture that we're trying to create. And so my firm belief in what I tried to instill in with our HR team and our hiring managers was that cultural awareness and cultural identification begins with the very first job post. And we talk about who we are and what we stand for and how we bring those values to life in the very first interview. Now, some people may say that gives you gives the candidate maybe an unfair advantage because they can mold what you want to hear. But at the same time, when we do hire that person, they know coming in what we expect of them and what we're going to attempt to hold them accountable for when it comes to the way that they show up, the way they behave, the way they interact with their coworkers and our clients.
Well, and every candidate's looking at the job ad and trying to figure out how do they kind of fit that mold. If they're smart, they are not actually, they're looking at, is this a good fit for me? But it's hard, and I get it, especially if you're in between jobs. I get why you do that, but that makes sense to me. And ideally it would push people who aren't a fit away, would be the other part of that. So Shauna, I feel like I want to ask you a question on a follow-up for her, but I haven't given you a chance to answer. But with your background, Allison really talked about this idea that we want this culture and how we work together is good. Mm-hmm. We also want a diversity of opinion. That's your background. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to leave it to you. Do you want to respond to what Allison said and take that forward? Or do you want to go give your definition of culture? What do you think is the best path from your perspective?
Oh, I feel like it's a combination of Becky and Allison's responses. I mean, when Becky talked about all the different factors that are taken into consideration when we think about culture, it is absolutely multifaceted, right? It's not just one thing that's taken into consideration. And then when I heard Allison talk about it, through the metaphor of air, that really resonated. It's the first time I've heard it expressed in that manner. And for me, not only did it resonate, but, as I thought about, how I define culture, that notion of air or feeling or sense, while it's intangible, but it's real in so many ways. I distill culture to words and behaviors. Mm-hmm. If one takes the time to just listen, notice the behaviors that are showing up, whether it's in a meeting or in that first interaction with, say, the receptionist at a company, right? Or, listening to the president. Words indicate much. Behavior indicates much. Is it aligned to enabling the success of the organization? Question mark. Yeah. Might it be detracting? Right? Might it be causing a slow demise? Question mark. But definitely a place for curiosity.
Nice. I like that. I love the way we're getting it. It is intangible. And I think right now, especially as business leaders, I know when we first went into the COVID crisis and we all shut down, we all went remote, we all did these things, we lost a lot of business. So I kind of wasn't watching the cultural piece at all. I was like, I got to go fill the pipeline. I got to close business, or we don't have a culture. And I think that is, we've gotten back to where that's much more in my mind every day as we meet as a team. But it's a challenge. And I think it's a challenge right now because as a business leader, you're constantly under stress. You're constantly almost in a fight or like a low level fight or flight situation where you're not, and you're having to make all these decisions. We're remote. We're not remote. Masks, no masks. Boulder needs for us. Sorry, Shauna, love your Canadian accent. It's delightful, by the way. And here in Boulder, it's required, but in Broomfield, it's not. And so if you cross it, if you go over the city boundary, you now have you have this challenge that you have to wear masks if you're going to meetings. And it's just, I think there's just so much going on and it's so big of a change. So I love that. So I'm excited to have the rest of that conversation. But first, I am going to briefly interrupt our conversation to talk about navigating the marketing landscape today. If you're a business leader and you're looking, as you sit down and you're making decisions about your marketing, you may have a question around gaps in your knowledge around what's important to your customers. You may not have a really solid understanding. If you do, a lot of times we're making these decisions, we're making them on gut feel, and it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. And so if you're having a struggle in your marketing or in closing business, maybe your sales pipeline's slow, you may want to reach out to us. What we do is we work with companies and we help them build data and leverage data to create a true connection with their customers. And the way that we do that is we actually go out and interview your best customers, have conversations with them, and ask them questions like, what's important to you in this business relationship? Why did you start to work with them? Why would you ever leave? What were the considerations as you're kind of mid-funnel? It's often B2B. If you're mid-funnel and you're or mid-sales process and you're starting to compare companies and think about which one company should I go with, what's important as you're making that decision? When you're coming down to that final, okay, we're down to 3 and we have to choose somebody, what's important then? And then we help you leverage that data to either upgrade your marketing, maybe upgrade your sales process, maybe a little bit of both. So that said, we also have a webinar coming up, and you're going to ask me in a question, why on earth would a marketing company have a webinar about the Great Resignation? Well, we are. So we're partnering with an HR consulting company as well as a leadership consulting firm. And what we're doing is we're saying, okay, if you have a problem with the Great Resignation, your people are leaving in droves, or maybe they're considering leaving and you don't know it, then you really should start with what we're talking about today, which is the culture piece. How do you create an environment that keeps them there? At the same time, you need to have good HR practices. How are you going to conduct your stay interviews? What are you going to do with that data? How are you going to respond? Finally, if you have that data, how do you communicate it both internally and externally? So I'll give you the one hint I'll give you as we go out of that is if you have your HR people writing your job ads and not reviewing the job ads your marketing team wrote, you're making a mistake, because marketers should be writing your job ads. And then HR should just make sure they're compliant, because that's not our specialty. But basically, marketing's job is to make something compelling and interesting. Most job ads aren't. So let's move into our next question. I'll pop it on the screen. We've gone into this a little bit, but why focus on culture now? Why is that important? I think if you're a business leader, and this is a real question of, if you're a business leader, all the things that I talked about, that you have to make sure your sales pipeline's full. You have to make sure that you're growing. You have to there's new regulations. Now maybe there's the whole, if you're over 100 employees, now you have to make sure they're all vaccinated, at least if you're in the United States. I think you're probably safe if you're in Canada like Shauna. But that said, this is a challenge. And if you happen to have a branch in Canada and a branch in the United States, what the heck do you do with that? So why focus on culture now? Allison, why don't you get us started on that?
If you continue that metaphor of the air we breathe is culture, if you're not focusing on it, it's running you. And so it can either keep you on your track or it can kill you, right? If you allow it to become toxic. So there's this business case, right? Your company can be more successful if you're optimizing the performance and collaboration of your people. But I would also argue purely from a ethical and principled perspective that creating an environment where employees can do their best work, find their passions, and contribute meaningfully to something that they believe in, that's an even higher goal than trying to make more dollars on the bottom line. And the fun thing is, this is what I talk about a lot, it's not an either or proposition. It actually serves both purposes. We create a place where people can thrive and we support our bottom line and our ability to realize the vision and the impact that we have for our company.
Wow, awesome. And I appreciate the idea that it's not, you don't have to choose, that they go together. If you do one, then the other comes. And I think it's also, if you, and to some degree, I fell victim to, I let myself fall victim to this when we were early in COVID, is if you're the hero kind of saving the company and the rest of your team is kind of sitting there and you're not really watching the culture, they're not as productive. Boy, are you trying to push a boulder uphill now. Because once you get things going in one direction, it's almost like you've got your hand in the dike and you're kind of stretched out like in the cartoons when I was a kid. I don't know that everybody had those cartoons, but I did, where they're like trying to plug the hole, trying to plug another hole, and the next thing they don't have enough fingers. All right, Shauna, what are your thoughts? Why now?
I think this particular time, especially because all of us are still navigating the pandemic, can be a brilliant moment to really get a sense for the culture that exists. And what I mean by that is, when things are good, right? When, the bottom line is strong, revenue potential is there, not a whole lot of factors that are creating waves amongst the people in an organization, it feels good. People show up in a way that feels right, likely more optimistic, more positive. In moments like this, when people are stressed, they are concerned about basic need fulfillment. They are wondering, and concerned about the future. From my experience, these are the moments that indicate what the culture really is. Right. So, and I see Allison and Becky nodding their heads, but and that's why I say it can be brilliant. It will take courage on the part of any business leader to immerse themselves enough to see and listen and pay attention to what's happening. But I really believe that now has the potential of being a really incredible time, because if you can label it, if you can be real with people, if you can play back their words and their behavior in a way to show this is where we are, but let's bring back what it is we're aiming to be or show up as an organization, then the possibility of actually kind of leaping forward from a cultural standpoint, I think is very possible.
Well, I love what you're saying. So for me, the idea that you don't know who your company is, like you really don't know people until you've met them when they're stressed.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when you know who people really are at their core, how they respond to things. Are they really kind or are they not? And it's the same with your company. That you don't really know who your company is and what your culture is until you throw some stress at it. And then now, how do you guide? Now, the other part, and Shauna, I think you'll have a background to talk about this. The only way, so if you look at a company under stress and people are thinking about basic needs, they are stressed.
Mm-hmm.
The business leader has to have a pretty high level of personal awareness and fortitude to be able to lead in a way that helps them be okay. I know a little bit because of our introduction, you have a background. Any tips? Like one tip that comes to top of mind? I'm sorry, that was an unexpected question. If you need a second to think about it, okay.
The first word that comes to my mind is courage. For anybody individually, this is a difficult time. For individuals who have the responsibility of leading others, it is probably the most difficult experience that they've had, right? Or quite up there as far as challenging experiences. Finding the courage to be vulnerable. If you don't know, say you don't know, because there are likely a lot of other people who don't know either. And finding your safe space, your safe people, to be able to share what you need to share, right? Just say it out loud, not feel judged, use that time to re-energize, and then go back and help, and go back in and take care of your people in the best way that you know how.
All right. What that brought up for me, I grew up here in Denver, Colorado from the West. I'm a native, and that's a big deal if you're from Colorado. Doesn't really matter. But, I grew up reading Westerns, and there was this theme that it really struck out, and it talked about courage. And the idea was courage isn't being afraid. It's doing something even though you're afraid. So it's not, the message I'm hearing from you is, yeah, you're going to be intimidated, but you need to be strong enough to do things anyways, to do all the things you just listed anyways, and also build a support network so you have a place to go when you're struggling. But that really resonated for me of like, how do you do that when it is, as leaders, we're human. It is scary. It is hard as we're having to pivot and try to make these adjustments. And so you have to do this despite the fact that you're afraid. And courage is, but at least my definition of courage is not just not being afraid. It's really carrying along even if you are afraid. All right, Becky, pressure's on. That was a heck of an answer. I don't know.
I know. But what was coming up for me is that it's courage, but also combined with kindness. Mm-hmm. And strong kindness, and kindness for yourself and for everybody around you, and to know who your truth tellers are. Especially the higher up you are in the company, people aren't telling you things. How do you really know what's going on? And I come from a cautionary tale of a company that was Fortune 200 company in Colorado that was growing so exponentially, they totally lost sight of where their culture was. It was abusive. It was, we're not for everyone. People were leaving all the time. It was like a revolving door of people leaving. And finally, the company was called the worst company in America, the meanest company in America. And first year they said, that's not true. Second year, they finally got religion. Started doing engagement surveys. We started doing leadership development and really dug down into who we are and what is it that is causing this. And part of it was a very competitive nature. One of the values of the company was winning. Didn't describe what that was. So it was just, if I'm ahead of all you guys, I'm winning. If my department's ahead of all you guys, I'm winning. But it was causing silos, it was causing horrible things, and just trying to work through that. So I guess, why is it important? It's always important. You've always got to be thinking about, what are we doing? What is it causing? And again, who are those truth tellers? How do you really find out what is really happening all over the company, and not just what happy talk people might be telling you?
Right. And the hard, I think, as a leader, when you have a truth teller who's coming in, it's hard because they're telling you the things you don't want to hear. And it's easy to go, wow, they're just not a team player. And, it's really easy to go with that mold, and you need to not, and sometimes that's actually the harder part, is even sometimes that's true. And sometimes it's not. They're a team player who's real, and sometimes they're just not a team player. And I get it. And it's both, right? And you have to figure that out. But if you don't have that data, you're just surrounded. You don't have any data. Yeah. And then really what I heard is being careful. We talked a lot about language and how important language is. And so, what company doesn't want to have a winning culture? But it was really defined, at least if I understand your story and what happened, it was win-lose.
Yeah.
We win, you lose is our culture. And it was internal and external. We're not a team. You were saying something. Go right ahead.
Yeah, they switched it to we win as a team, and really spent a lot of time talking about what that really meant. Mm-hmm. And also really talking about meetings, talking about the culture, talking about what was important, who we are, where we wanted to go. It was happening all the time, and it was being taught all through the company.
All right.
Which really,
I'm sorry. I gotta move us forward, and I apologize. This is the first time I've ever had to interrupt anybody, but I just realized Shauna has to leave in just a minute, and I've let us go over. So I want to pop to our next question. We're going to go to Shauna because she's got to jump on a call really quick here. Shauna, we're going to start with you. Give us one concrete baby step to get started, and then we'll move forward. And again, Becky, I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
Okay. Baby step. Not sure it's a baby step. What I will say is, in the context of immersion, which I mentioned earlier, listen to the language. We've talked about language. Understand the definition of the words that people are using. So dig deep. If you're going to immerse yourself and you're going in with the seek to understand mindset, be sure to ask, what do you mean by that word?
All right, very cool. And I agree. They didn't have a good definition of winning, and look what happened. All right, Shauna, I know you need to go. Thank you so much for coming today. All right, Allison, what is your?
I would echo, something that kind of ties in with this language piece, and it's get good at noticing, get good at exploring the behaviors you observe and your reactions to them. And then practice describing those to other people, both the behavior and the reaction, because your ability to articulate what you want to see and why it's important and why it impacts the way the company is headed or detracts from the way the company is headed is at the root of any of the cultural work that you'll need to do organization-wide.
All right, very cool. All right, Becky, what's your response? Go right ahead.
Get crystal clear on your values, and then communicate, and really thinking about clarity. Be really clear on it, what it is, consistent. So do it all the time, and constancy. So it's a drumbeat, and you're always thinking about it all the time.
Boy, and alliteration. Look at you. That's awesome. All right, folks, it is 12:30. I'm going to briefly say next week we are going to have another session, and we're going to talk about how you can improve the B2B experience. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sorry I have gone exactly 12 seconds over, and we're going to end it here. Have a great day, everybody.